What's going on, guys? I got a special guest for us today, Ben Velazquez, who's actually a licensed Soma Trainer, award-winning, national recognized strength and conditioning coach who specializes in preventive concussion exercises. Ben, it's an honor to have you on. I know it's a busy week right now, but thank you for coming on Pure Evil MMA. I can't wait to discuss a couple of things with you. But first off, how is your week going?
My week's going well, and thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on, and happy holidays to everyone listening.
So you are over in New York right now. You were telling me when I called in how crazy it is over there. Can you just tell everybody what it's like in New York? We got listeners all over the world, and over on the East Coast, things really turn up this week.
Yeah, so New York during Christmas time is pretty unique because of all the different sightseeing possibilities you have here, especially in Manhattan. Predominantly the tree, which is, I think this year is like the largest tree in history at Rockefeller Center. So you have millions of tourists coming in. On top of that, you have millions of people shopping. And then you have our president-elect has plenty of streets blocked off. So it's kind of chaos out there. But yeah, we're doing okay despite that.
So how's your year been going, man? I know that you've been doing a lot of research, working with a lot of guys with concussions. It's a hot topic. I actually just got to talk with Gary Goodridge, that you guys must be all familiar with as well. Who has problems with concussions and has had some brain trauma. What do you do to help these fighters that have received concussions?
So to answer that question, I have to tell you kind of how I came to that point. In the last, I would say, 7 to 10 years, I've been doing a lot more what I call performance rehabilitation. So if an athlete has had a surgery or has had an injury, generally speaking, there's a really big gap that exists between conventional physical therapy, what everyone gets, and the athlete being ready to get back in the octagon or get back on the field or get back on the court, what we call game ready. So I've been working to bridge that gap that exists, and it's kind of a blend of strength and conditioning and a lot of rehabilitation. In doing so, when concussions became really hot in the media, I started in my eval asking guys, how many times have you had a concussion? And I was really surprised that no matter what the sport was, it was as high as 70, 75%. So 7 out of 10 guys that came in, whether it be for an ankle injury or a knee injury or a hip or a shoulder, at one point or another, they had suffered a concussion, at least one. So I said, how can I look at this differently, and what can you do from an exercise or from a mechanical perspective to help these guys that have been concussed, and to also to prepare athletes that are involved in combat sport for impact or impulse.
So you work with athletes in the NFL, NHL, and now MMA, of course, is what I cover. And you've worked alongside Chris Weidman. What goes into it? I know that there's 5 steps that you guys work to help rehabilitate them. What are those 5 steps, the 5 tiers?
Well, I worked with Chris, to be very honest, just a little bit 2 summers ago, and great guy, great athlete, and when it comes to a contact sport athlete like that, what we're looking at just like it's any other injury. So we would assume that an MMA fighter has had some type of head trauma. And in doing so, when we evaluate them, we want to say, okay, what is this athlete's awareness? What is this athlete's mobility? What is this athlete's strength? What is this athlete's posture? What is this athlete's proprioception, which is just a fancy word that means information. So we gather all these different qualities on these athletes, and it's just like building an investment portfolio. What does Eddie need today that's different from fighter X? And we build a structure based on that. That's basically the formula. It's, looking at different components and looking at it globally. That's the biggest issue in sports now, is that they're kind of looking at concussions from the head up, and it involves the entire body. That's how you dissipate force. And anybody who's taken a martial art, first thing they teach you how to do is fall, and they teach you how to
Yeah,
dissipate
fall
force.
the right, yeah, spin over.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it's been a raising awareness, especially with young kids playing football. Have you done studies with younger children at all?
Worked with a couple of young athletes. When I say young, I mean like under the age of 15. It's amazing the contact that goes on even at that young an age, especially in football and in hockey. I don't see a lot of football because you don't see that so much here in the tri-state area. That's more out west or down in Florida or out in California that, it's Friday Night Lights, right?
Yeah, and those kids are big compared to what we got over here on the East Coast too. Those are
Oh, no
like a
doubt.
different breed.
Yeah, no doubt. They're big, and they don't seem to really care about the concussion issue when it comes to that level of football. I see a lot of hockey, believe it or not, a lot of recreational sports like skateboarding and just bicycling and sports you wouldn't even think of
Like
where
parkour
guys take a lot
probably
of balls.
too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. There seems to be fewer really serious ones in combat sports than people think. It's more in recreational sports. I mean, everything from equestrian to cheerleading. We've seen swimmers, hitting their head on the side of the pool or on a diving board and have suffered bad concussions. Like I said, equestrian. So it kind of covers the gamut. It really does. Yeah.
So for my listeners out there that are sitting here wondering like a concussion, what's a concussion? How would I even know if I had a concussion? What are the signs?
So initially, the concussion was defined as the brain basically getting jarred around inside the skull, what they call coup and contra coup. And the symptoms can vary anywhere from nausea to dizziness to completely blacking out to loss of cognition. That's the thing. The definition of concussion is really expanding because the guys that are in academia studying this are realizing that there's different types of concussions. So a fighter gets hit right on the button on the jaw.
Yep.
He might get concussed, but might get knocked out. That doesn't necessarily mean that he has a brain lesion. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the same as a football player who gets a helmet-to-helmet collision. So that's one type of concussion. You might have an ex-soldier that is exposed to blasts that suffers a different type of concussion
Yeah.
as a result of the blast, and they were never touched. So to be honest with you and your audience, the definition is expanding quite a bit, and a lot is being researched with regards to that huge umbrella that we're calling traumatic brain injury and concussions.
Now with fighters especially, since they got to stay active, they're on a contract. They get a
Mhm.
concussion, they get a couple of months suspension. How long would you recommend after getting a concussion to return to combat?
It depends on a lot of factors.
Okay.
With a
Yeah, of course.
concussion, with an athlete that's been concussed badly, especially a fighter, where their job is to deliver and take punishment, the risks are much higher. It's not like the guy's going to go back to play basketball. He's going to go
Yeah.
back to fighting. So the risks are much higher. So you have to ensure that you've recovered completely. And every concussion is different. So, just because the athlete is asymptomatic, they don't have any symptoms, that doesn't mean that they've recovered completely. My recommendation is always it's three prongs, right, Eddie? One is there's a mechanical component. So you have to get somebody that is really good to work on you and to make sure that everything is right from your cervical spine all the way down. You have to clean up, make sure that your diet is good because there's a biochemical component as well. And
Yeah.
you want to lower inflammation. And then there's a neurological component. So, if you're getting vertigo, that's not the time to get back in there and mix it up. So from a fighter's perspective, I would say that you have to be very careful before you return to training, specifically doing drills and sparring.
What emotional changes do you see your patients go through when they get a concussion and throughout the year?
That's an excellent question because that's probably the single most driving force that is pushing me to really research this on my end and how can I help, because every single athlete that I've seen across the board has had some type of psychological or psychosocial component as a result of the head trauma.
Like
You
a
know,
it's a
yeah,
traumatic experience.
yeah, because what happens is that there's a without making it really complicated, your brain hormones. Everybody's heard the names epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin. Those are called brain hormones, and those brain hormones are severely altered when you have a bad concussion.
Well, the
So
receptors are damaged or something.
the receptors are not necessarily damaged, but the process of how these different hormones get produced
Okay.
and um, how they get accepted and by the brain gets altered. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
That's probably the easiest way to understand it is that, and it's, if you think about it, the brain hormones, it's like a symphony, and they all have to play at a certain time, and they have to be in sync. And if a head trauma affects one or two of those hormones, there's a cascade and it affects all of those hormones. So certain guys can't sleep enough, other guys can't sleep at all. Some guys are anxious, some guys are depressed. I mean, it runs the gamut. It really can. But generally speaking, the culprit is some type of head trauma or multiple head traumas.
Well, like in the sport of MMA, we saw Ronda Rousey face a pretty damaging blow last year to Holly Holm. We saw Jose Aldo. I mean, and they got a return and the stress level. That's why I'm interested about the emotional factors of it, because they have to return and they have a certain amount of time. For the kid out there who's 15 years old watching, who thinks he might have a concussion, what's a good diet, or anyone, what's a good diet to go on after you experience a concussion or head trauma?
The beauty of the internet right now is that there's so much information available at your fingertips. So the easiest thing to do is to kind of Google anti-inflammatory diets, or even the paleo diet for an athlete that has had some type of trauma, and you're safe with that. I mean, I'm not a medical doctor and every athlete is different, but if I was going to give a general recommendation, I would say, yeah, just look up anti-inflammatory diet. That means, like, you're eliminating sugar, you're eliminating grains, you're eliminating dairy, and you're just eating non-processed, good, hopefully healthy, organic food. And you're going to create a better environment for yourself to heal, whether it's an ankle injury or a concussion.
So now, when these fighters or athletes, they come to you, do you work with their whole team to get as much information as you can about them before they came to you, and after? Like, say for example, I'm a fighter and I come to you, what's going on now? I come to you, what's being set up, and what do I know is going to be changing within our treatment?
That's a good question, because the reason why I'm very interested in the MMA now is several. Number one is because it's one of those sports where I'm guaranteed impact. So I'm guaranteed a lot of patients, and I'm guaranteed a lot of lab work with athletes. Number two is that with the advent of the new performance guidelines that the UFC is undergoing now, with Jeff Novinsky at the helm, they're going to be doing a lot of testing, and the testing is going to be the highest level available. So the age of the athletes being able to kind of utilize help in any way is going to be over. So there's got to be greater attention paid to their plan, meaning their preparation performance-wise, and also, more importantly, their recovery. So MMA really interests me because it's going to be undergoing some changes. And it's one of those sports where there's a lot of room for change, in my opinion. One of the things that's very dangerous for concussions is the whole cutting weight thing.
Yes.
Um,
Okay. Yep.
so in a sport where guys are going to cut that much weight and dehydrate themselves, they make themselves extremely susceptible to traumatic brain injury.
Your organs
Because
are all dehydrated and not a pretty sight.
yeah, so you don't really rehydrate that quick from one night to the next. It doesn't work that way. So you make yourself more susceptible. Have On top of that, it's one of those sports where you have multiple disciplines. You got to work on your hand game, you got to work on your ground game, you got to work on your wrestling, and so recovery becomes extremely important. And it's a place where you can make some really good changes that are based on sports science, where you can help a lot of guys, and that's my interest.
And with this, especially right now, there's been a huge movement. A lot of fighters are voicing out like we need to be, taken care of the right way, and they need to reach the top notch. And 2016 has been a huge year. What have you accomplished this year alone, and what are you aiming to accomplish in 2017 by this time?
So 2016, I was kind of building a platform, and mind you, my specialty is more the mechanical end. My background's in engineering and the rehab that I did. So I'm looking at how can I use exercise, corrective exercise, to better ensure that the athlete protects themselves, or the athlete that's been concussed. How can I use corrective exercise to help them to rehabilitate, instead of the usual protocol, which is sit in the dark room and wait till the symptoms go away, which doesn't work, will never work, and it only puts the athletes at more harm. So that's my focus. I'm building a platform. I've been lecturing in 2016. I've been putting together my protocols so that I can make them available to a wider audience. Digitally, I can say, hey, guys, jump on this app, and I have 4 phases of preparation that little Johnny can do in Boise, Idaho, because he wants to mix it up. So that's kind of what I'm working on, and hopefully that all gets completed by early 2017.
So you're working with 22 current and former NHL athletes, 18 current and former MLB players, 12 current NFL athletes, 5 athletes. You helped at the 2000 Sydney Olympic Games. How do you keep all of this and like what's your team? Like who do you work with and how do you guys do all of this with all these guys?
I'm really lucky. I've got really good people. I've got good people on both coasts that I can refer an athlete to. My generally guys will come in and they're banged up, or like I said, have had surgery, whatever. They come in for a couple of weeks. I get them right. I can send them to somebody that I trust on the West Coast. My buddy Scotty Prohaska's on the West Coast. He's awesome. He works with Bisbing and Uriah Hall and all those guys. He's a very good performance coach. I have somebody excellent in Montreal. I have somebody really, really good on the in Dallas, in the Dallas area, and I'm here on the East Coast. So I trust those guys, and I have very good therapists that everything from osteopaths to chiropractors. And then as far as the nutritional stuff is handled by a guy here in New York that I use, who does all functional medicine stuff. So those to me are the most important. Is the guy getting treated? Is it the right training protocol or the right rehab protocol? And is the guy getting treated properly, soft tissue treatment?
And do you talk to the fighters' coaches? Like, listen, we're working with this guy. Let's take it easy doing, sparring or stuff like that. Do you talk with the coaches that they work with?
If they're open to it, yeah. I've worked with several high-level boxers, and one guy was really concussed, and I worked closely with the coach because we used certain defensive drills to give me a better idea of when he was ready to get back to training. So the coach helped me with that. I'm like, okay, you got to tell me if he looks like he's moving the way that he moves. And if he doesn't, so it made him feel like he was a part of it, and he really was, because to me that's the best indicator if that fighter is he knows him better than me, So that, yeah, we do when you have a coach that's open. The problem with the coaching in any sport is if you run into a coach who's a jack of all trades. You know, I tend to stay in my lane. You know, I'm not a boxing coach. I'm not a wrestling coach. I'm not a therapist, you know, and I like when other people stay in their lane.
So is age a huge factor towards this? Like if I'm 27 years old and I get, the same damage done to my skull as somebody who's 10 years younger than me, if we had the same process done, do you think he would heal quicker than I do? Or is it not like that with concussions?
I think it plays a factor, but it's more about training age. So there was a really interesting study. I don't know if it was MIT or Harvard that did a study on actual age. And so they'll say, okay, Eddie, what's your chronological age? Okay. Now let's look at your lifestyle. Okay, now let's run genetic testing. Okay, now let's look at your nutrition. And based on that, they give you an actual biological age. So you're 32, but you're really 26 biologically. Or this fighter is 25, but he's got a lot of hard miles. This guy's really 38 years old. Yep. So that guy's more susceptible to damage than,
I like that
let's call it, what's that Cuban dude, the wrestler that just beat Weidman? He's 30-something years old. Yeah. So he's a little bit older, but he's a superb athlete. And so his biological age may be a lot less than what his real chronological age is. And so it's a tough one to answer. Everybody's individual.
So as we get towards the end of this interview, I need you to lay this old wives' tale, or if it's a reality, to rest. If I have a concussion and I take a nap, will I not wake up?
No, it's a wives' tale. Okay. Yeah, the reason they don't want you to go to sleep is because if you have any kind of bleeding in the brain, if you suffer a blow that's that bad where you get nauseous and you pass out, or if you have a really bad headache or dizziness, you should go see a neurologist. You should go to the hospital and get a CAT scan. And the hospital will tell you when everything's okay. The danger is if you go home and go to bed and God forbid you have a bleed, then you're running into some serious trouble.
Listen, I got one more question. My dad he's a construction worker. He got hit in the head. He was jackhammering, got hit in the top of the head, had a huge gash. Instead of going to the hospital, he went to the liquor store. How much damage did he do? More damage to himself by doing that?
Initially, he probably felt
because
really
the
good.
blood's thin out.
Yeah, no, that's old school. But yeah, it's probably depends on what he felt like afterwards. Yeah, it's not the best thing to go booze it up because you're gonna mask everything and you probably dehydrate yourself as well. So I wouldn't recommend that.
All right, I'll make sure I relay that message. All right, how can everybody get a hold of you? And if they see this interview, they hear about you, how do they reach out to you?
They can reach out to me on Facebook, Ben Velazquez, or the group of the practitioners is called Gray Matter Sports Group, and we're just getting that going. On Instagram, I think I'm BV in NYC, and or on Twitter as well. I'm getting all that going, so I'm not the most socially savvy, but it's out there.
Last question. Did your 2016 New Year's resolution come true, or did you let it slip through the cracks?
Nah, dude. Yeah, I'm doing exactly what I want to do. I'm trying to help a lot of guys, and I'm gonna brand myself as the guy with concussions and exercise, and that's the goal.
Thank you so much for coming on Pure Evil MMA, Ben. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to talk with you, and you have a great New Year's and a great 2017, brother.
You too, brother. Happy holidays to everyone. Be safe.